Good evening. This is Mottek On Money. We're doing it live here in the 5 o'clock hour. You're on 790 KABC. Streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Right down to the serious news here this evening on the war in the Middle East. The U.S. has already begun delivering critically needed munitions and military equipment to Israel, and the Pentagon reviewing inventories to see what else can be sent quickly to boost its ally in the three-day-old war with Hamas. This according to a senior Defense Department official. Planes have already taken off. They declined to provide details on the type of weapons. Looks like they warned the U.S. is closely watching Hezbollah and other Iranian-backed groups, noting that the decision to ship American ships in the region was to deter any of them from entering or expanding the conflict against Israel. The weapons movement coming as President Biden announced the U.S. death toll in the war has gone up by up to 11. The Pentagon official said the U.S. is now flooding the zone with calls and other messages so that extremist groups and other nations know they should not question America's commitment to supporting the defense of Israel. But the official would not comment on whether the U.S. military forces would be used in the conflict. We did see a roller coaster ride in the financial markets today following the big news over the weekend with Hamas attacking Israel on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of nearly 200 points after earlier losses. The S&P 500 finished with a gain of 27 points, and the Nasdaq ended higher by 53 points. Declines for equities eased later in the day after remarks by the Dallas Fed president were seen as indicating a surge in long-term Treasury yields might mean the central bank has less need to further raise interest rates. Stocks extended early afternoon gains after remarks by the Fed vice chair that also highlighted a rise in long-term government bond yields, which have been propelling mortgage rates to 23-year highs. I'll be discussing the war in Israel tonight with Lisa DAFTARI, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, recipient of the Simon Wiesenthal Medal of Valor for defending human rights and for her work in highlighting the ongoing courageous protests by Iranians against the Islamic Republic following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini at the hands of the Islamic Morality Police last year. Lisa DAFTARI will be joining us live later this hour. We also saw reaction in the oil markets today, with oil prices surging about 4%, recovering some of last week's steep losses as the military clashes between Israel and the Palestinian Islamic group Hamas ignited fears that a wider conflict could hit oil supply from the Middle East. We saw the price of oil move up $3.59 to $86.38 a barrel in New York, up more than 4%. And the international benchmark Brent crude settled more than 4% higher, up $3.57 to $88.15 a barrel. I'll be discussing oil and gas prices tonight and the crisis in the Middle East with prominent oil industry analyst John KILDUFF at Again Capital and CNBC contributor, longtime contributor to this program as well. But first, on the horrific attack on Israel over the weekend on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War in the Middle East, the declaration of war by Israel on Hamas, and the economic and political fallout now. Joining us live is Ben Stein, financial and political commentator, economist, author of numerous books, White House speechwriter. Ben Stein, thank you very much for being a contributor over decades on this program. We've talked a lot about many crises over the years, and now this one. I think you were at the White House 50 years ago during the Yom Kippur War. Give us your reaction to the events of the weekend.
Well, it shows that even the Israelis, who are so incredibly highly regarded as being always on the alert, always at the top of the class in terms of their abilities to understand what's going on around them and to assess the dangers, totally missed the boat on this. Their negligence was breathtaking. The fact that they could not spot that this was happening is almost unbelievable. Yes, of course, lots of the terrorists were in caves underground, but they couldn't all be in caves underground. And there apparently were huge amounts of rockets being shipped from North Korea to Iran and thence to to Hamas in what used to be the Gaza. Well, I guess it's going to be the Gaza Strip for a little while longer. And somehow we missed that. And apparently, even once the attack started, the Israeli government did not really fully understand what was going on or the scope of what was going on. And that was passed on to the U.S. Now, the U.S. has a very large number of surveillance satellites up in the sky above the Middle East and everywhere else. I don't know whether the number is in the hundreds or the thousands, but it's a very large number. And the fact that we couldn't spot what was going on, and something quite unusual was going on, is really terrifying in terms of the U.S. as well as Israel. And if I may say this, it shocks me that Israel is not being held up to more blame by its own people in this horrible extremity. What can have been going on there? I mean, what on earth can they have been thinking about that was more important than their own survival? And yet, this was an existential threat.
On there live with Ben Stein, and you probably saw the front page of today's Wall Street Journal, which said Iranian security officials helped plan Hamas's Saturday surprise attack on Israel and gave the green light for the assault at a meeting in Beirut last Monday. According to senior members of Hamas and Hezbollah, another Iran-backed militant group, Iran appears to have a hand in this. Your reaction to that part of the story?
I don't think anyone had any question whatsoever that Iran was playing an enormous part in it. And the really astonishing thing is that apparently even this afternoon, Eastern time, maybe even Western time, the White House was saying they weren't sure that Iran was involved in this. Well, they'd have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to know that. And what are they doing? Are they employees of the Iranian government? What do they think they're doing? Somehow, this has all gotten balled up in a gigantic way, and it terrifies me to think if this is what's happening in Israel, what can happen to the U.S.? Iran is going to have the nuclear bomb soon. There's not much doubt about that. The Russians are helping them. The Chinese are helping them. The North Koreans are helping them. I think the Pakistanis are helping them. What do we do then? They're going to have a rocket that will reach the U.S. They have, of course, lots of rockets that will reach Israel. They have already promised to the world the evil, sickening promise that they will have a Holocaust in an afternoon if they get the atom bomb and the rockets to deliver it to Israel. What are we going to do about that? I mean, if it were me and I were Mr. Netanyahu, I would set to work on bombing every facility in Iran that has the capacity for making nuclear weapons right now. And if we get criticized at the UN, the hell with them. They have always been on the wrong side in everything. They're never on the right side. And this is a country, Israel, which could literally be wiped off the map in an hour and a half. And why is Israel hesitating, in my question, in doing something to absolutely, definitely, without question, stop it? And why isn't the U.S. backing them up? Once the Iranians have come for Israel, they're going to come for the U.S. They already have announced that they have rockets that will reach New York and Los Angeles, Dallas, San Francisco. What makes us think they won't use them? If they are so evil and sick with bloodlust that they will send the killers to Israel to break into families, take the girls in the family, pull them out nude by their hair, drag them down the street, nude, rape them repeatedly on video, send the videos out over the internet, then drag the women around from the backs of jeeps and trucks until the women are dead, and then cut their heads off, and then leave the bodies there. If they are that evil, which they are, what would stop them from using an atom bomb on the United States or Israel?
On the live with Ben Stein for a very serious discussion on what's happening in the Middle East. And we've seen U.S. military moves being made. The defense secretary says he ordered the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group to sail to the eastern Mediterranean, ready to assist Israel. The Ford is the Navy's newest and most advanced aircraft carrier. Approximately 5,000 Navy sailors on board. A deck of warplanes will be accompanied by cruisers and destroyers in a show of force that is meant to be ready to respond to anything. Obviously, a lot of concern now about whether this conflict will escalate and whether Israel will attack Iran. We see a Reuters report. I'm reading here, just coming across the wires, President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, uncomfortable allies in the best of times, will put their uneasy relationship to a further test, with Israel preparing a possible ground assault on the Palestinian Gaza Strip. After months of strain over the path forward in the Middle East, the two leaders, who've known each other for decades, have been thrust into a wartime partnership following this deadly multi-pronged attack by Hamas militants from Gaza into Israel, which you just painfully described, Ben Stein. You think Israel will attack Iran and take out their nuclear sites at this point?
I hope so. I don't know. I hope so. Hope is not a strategy, but I think they have to. A very smart woman, commentator, said to me, I asked her years ago, what happens when Iran gets a nuclear weapon? And she said, in an hour, Israel turns all of Tehran into a glass parking lot. Well, it's time to do it now. I mean, the Iranians, the ordinary Iranian person doesn't deserve to die, but I think one Holocaust is enough. And if people are promising a Holocaust, I don't think they deserve any mercy. I don't think their citizens deserve any particular amount of mercy. This is put up or shut up in terms of will Israel survive, and as I said, will the U.S. survive? There's no doubt, I think, in anyone's mind that the mullahs and
we're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth. The Brown Ambition podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help.
I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'm here to tell you what I would do, which is I ain't filing for bankruptcy. Unless I owed $1 million, something crazy, then I'm like, that makes sense. People be filing for bankruptcy for some old $10,000. No, there are other alternatives to filing for bankruptcy that won't curtail your ability to make money. You want to know some of them? Here you go. There's credit counseling.
Brown Ambition.
Wherever you listen.
Ali Khamenei, who runs Iran, are willing to die to see the U.S. suffer, and suffer very badly, very, very, very badly. In that case, why permit them to build themselves up to the point where there will be unstoppable deaths in the millions, tens of millions? It's a terrible, terrible situation. We've let it happen. Mr. Trump, I think, was much, much better about having policies in place to restrain the Iranians from getting nuclear weapons. Mr. Biden is not really willing to do much of anything about it. What on earth do we do except the most dramatic and drastic action? And I hate to see it. I would pray to God that somehow something happens so that this horrible event, the U.S. using nuclear weapons on Iran, or the Iranians using nuclear weapons on us, far worse. I just don't want to see any of that happening, but I'm afraid it requires very drastic action on our part to stop that. I mean, we've been pushed to the brink. We've been pushed to the wall.
You made a very important point earlier about how the White House says they're not sure if Iran is involved in this, and this is right after that $6 billion was transferred also, which is getting a lot of attention now. What do you think is going on here?
I think, first of all, I think Mr. Biden is not really fully compos mentis, a Latin phrase meaning of a composed mind. I think the people around him in the foreign policy establishment of the U.S. government have really very little idea of what's going on. I don't think they know much history. I don't think they know the fact that the worst can and does happen. It's really, really sad, but in this real world of ours, the worst can and does happen. The Iranians are not afraid to die. They are not afraid of being incinerated by U.S. nuclear weapons. They think it will be just a warm welcome to heaven for them. And it's a terrible, terrible adversary to face. I think that we better take the nuclear weapons out of their hands while we still can. But the day they get them and put out word over the internet that they've got 100 or 20 or 30 missiles, rockets with nuclear warheads aimed at New York and Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and Miami, that's the end of the world, really, basically. That's the end of the world. I don't want to see the end of the world because of these scum in Iran who are coming to kill us. And they shouldn't have been there in the first place. The Shah was in charge. He was our pal. He was not a terribly bad guy compared to the mullahs and to the clerics who run Iran now. But why didn't we back him up? That was that idiot Carter's fault. I mean, Carter was presented with options from U.S. intelligence people about what they could do to keep the Shah in power, and they were brutal. I mean, they were very serious. They would have involved shooting a lot of demonstrators. A terrible, terrible thing. But compared with the options that are now on the table, it looks palatable, if very ugly.
On the Air Live with Ben Stein, of course, we recall those days, the Carter days, when the Americans were taken hostage, and now we're hearing about these horrific hostage situations happening in Israel at the moment. And correct me if I'm wrong, were you at the White House 50 years ago when the Yom Kippur War broke out and there were concerns about World War III at that time? Tell us about what happened then and the comparisons to what happened here now.
Well, I was there, and to be sure, not in a particularly important capacity, but I was there, and I had access to pretty high-level news because, as I'm sure we've discussed many times on your wonderful program, my father was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, which was a very, very much higher position than mine. And he was kind enough to share with me the basic thinking that was going on, and that was some people at the White House said, don't even think of giving the Israelis any aid, and others said, please do give them aid. And my father was a close, not only an advisor, but a close friend of Mr. Nixon, and I was somewhat of a friend, nowhere near as close. And I think we begged and pleaded with him, and it was Nixon himself. It was not anybody else in the administration. It was not Kissinger. It was Nixon himself who said, look, we have got to stand up to the bad guys here, to the very, very bad guys, and especially stand up to the Russians who are helping the Egyptians and had promised the Egyptians to send in Russian paratroops to help the Egyptians beat the Israelis. And Nixon said that's absolutely unacceptable. We're going to what is called, I cannot now remember whether it was DEFCON 2 or DEFCON 3, but it meant we were very close to nuclear war. And the Russians backed down, and we, in return, took quite a few missiles out of Italy and Turkey. And I think that was a fine deal. But now there's nobody with the guts to stand up to the Iranians and to their allies in North Korea and other places in the world. We're just not. We're playing weak. We have weak leadership in a very tough, dangerous world. We need strong leaders, and I think if we had strong enough leaders, I don't think we would have to have nuclear war. But the way it is now, I think the Iranians are laughing up their sleeves at us. I keep remembering a very famous and well-documented scene in many, many, many documentaries about World War II, where before the Munich Pact, when the West basically backed down and let Hitler have his way in Europe, Hitler said to his top guys, our enemies are little worms, by which he meant Britain and France in particular. And he was right about that, except that Churchill was the farthest thing from a worm. But without Churchill, without his guts, I don't know what would have happened.
And back in 1980, we recall President Reagan's campaign slogan, the time is now for strong leadership, Reagan for president. And the hostage crisis didn't end until President Reagan was inaugurated that day, and that's when the hostages were freed at that time. Well, Ben Stein, I wish we had even more time here to discuss things with you. I hope we'll have the chance to do this again on these unfolding world developments here and the Israel war against Hamas. Thank you very much for taking the call here tonight.
God bless you. I'm always just a phone call away from you, my friend.
Thank you very much. That's great to know. We're on the air live with Ben Stein here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Friends, the future of joint pain relief has arrived. It's called QC Kinetics, Advanced Regenerative Medicine. Amazing stuff here. Frank Mottek speaking. If you've been told more steroids or surgery are your only options, don't be so fast. Get a second opinion. and learn more about how you can harness your body's own healing agents to attack that joint pain. I'm talking about lasting pain relief. QC Kinetics doesn't just mask the pain. These treatments go right to the very root of the problem using concentrated healing properties placed directly into your joint to restore and repair that damaged joint tissue. Imagine living your life this fall with no more pain in your knees, hips, shoulders, or back, no drugs, no surgery, and no downtime. Life's about motion, and QC Kinetics is giving people their lives back with these all-natural treatments. Call QC Kinetics for a free consultation, the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. QC Kinetics, locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, and now also in Costa Mesa. Call 213-997-PAIN. That's 213-997-PAIN. Again, 213-997-PAIN. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KABC. 790 KABC welcomes Adam Sandler to the Hollywood, make that the Honda Center on October 23rd. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show at the Honda Center on October 23rd. Adam Sandler will be there. You might be there, too. If you're caller 9, call now, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KABC. A positive start to the new week on Wall Street after a rough start after the opening bell this morning. Stocks moved lower in reaction to the epic events over the weekend in the Middle East. The Dow came in for a closing gain of nearly 200 points, settling at 33,604. The S&P 500 up 27 at 4,336. The Nasdaq gained 53 points at 13,484. The yield on the 10-year note now 4.65%. Airline stocks taking a hit today. Delta says its Tel Aviv flights have been canceled through October 31st. The airline said it's monitoring the situation and making schedule adjustments accordingly. United Airlines shares also down, both United and Delta down about 5% on the day. Among the winners, the aerospace and defense stocks, Northrop Grumman shares moving up today by nearly $50 a share to $471 and change, and L3 Harris moved up $16 at $180 and change. Crypto's moving mostly higher. Bitcoin up 50 to 27,627. Ethereum up 5 at 1,582. Doge at 6 cents. The price of oil moving higher. We'll be talking about this coming up in the next half hour with oil industry analyst John KILDUFF. Crude oil futures in New York moving up $3.59 to $86.38 a barrel. At Southern California gas pumps, we're looking at $5.99, the average price for regular, $6.35, the average price for premium, and $6.45 now the average price for diesel. Mottek on Money continues here in 790 KABC as we follow the war in Israel closely following the surprise attack by Hamas over the weekend. Front page article in today's Wall Street Journal says Iranian security officials helped plan Hamas's Saturday surprise attack on Israel and gave the green light for the assault at a meeting in Beirut last week, according to senior members of Hamas and Hezbollah. This according to the Wall Street Journal. As you heard Ben Stein tell us again, you probably saw the reports earlier. The Biden administration says it's not sure if Iran is involved with this situation. The surprise attack on Saturday caught Israel's military and intelligence services off guard as hundreds of Hamas gunmen poured through holes blown in the border fence and rampaged through several towns, killing hundreds of soldiers and Israeli civilians and capturing scores of others now taken hostage. The Israeli military trying to regain control of the situation. In the meantime, U.S. military resources have been mobilized, including the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier being sent to the region. Joining us live now is Lisa DAFTARI, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, recipient of the Simon Wiesenthal Medal of Valor for defending human rights and for her work in highlighting the ongoing courageous protests by Iranians against the Islamic Republic following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini at the hands of the Islamic Morality Police last year. Lisa, thank you very much for taking the call, and give us your reaction to the outbreak of war in Israel following that surprise attack over the weekend.
Yeah, it's been horrific. Thank you, Frank, for having me on. It's been horrific for anybody who has seen the footage coming out. This is traditional warfare meets ISIS 2014 with the gory shock value videos, horror film, type of scenes with bloody bodies just spread out throughout the streets. I mean, they were going for shock value. They were going.
Former Navy SEAL Mike Ritland keeps it real on the Mike Drop podcast. former Navy SEAL and current CrossFit King Dave Castro.
Is there one thing that you took away from the SEAL community that you apply kind of in your everyday life?
Here's the reality. So getting out was a no-brainer. Financially able to provide for my family much better with CrossFit than I was with the Navy. But if it hadn't been for CrossFit, I for sure would have stayed in for 20. I loved what I did.
Mic drop. Raw. Unfiltered. Intellectually sound. Wherever you listen.
For depth, they were not going for any sort of political statement. They were going to kill Jews. And that's why that's the massacre that we saw. There's a lot of questions, obviously, about, how this happened, why this happened, how long they've been planning it. But I think as the hours have gone by, Israel has been able to secure its southern border to Gaza, getting rid of the 1,000 militants who came into the country, going through the homes, finding more dead bodies, and really seeing the damage, the horrific, barbaric attack and all of its consequences on the innocent civilians of Israel.
And you probably heard the comments of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a few moments ago that we broadcast here, and the Israeli response is going to be severe. What about Iran's involvement in this?
Yeah, well, we expected, the reaction from Israel to be severe. I mean, every action has a consequence. And I think Israel has always held back because of global opinion. Well, global opinion about Israel at this moment does not matter. It does not matter what is said in the cover of the New York Times or at the UN, but it will matter that Israel goes and defends its civilians, it defends its citizens after this bloody massacre that we saw. With regards to the connection to Iran's regime, well, we've known that Iran has written the checks to Hamas and other terror proxies in the region, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, Palestinian Islamic Jihad also in the West Bank and Gaza. And, of course, has been supporting and training Hamas. Even though they're a Sunni group and Iran's regime is Shiite, they have found a partner in terrorism, a partner to terrorize Israel and to do their dirty work, and, of course, be very, very happy doing so. So, yes, Iran has not only paid, they have trained, they have executed with them. They have their fingerprints entirely on this. And now, as you alluded to, the Wall Street Journal investigative piece that came out last night, it very explicitly outlines the timeline with which Iran not only gave the green light, but met 4 different terror proxies.
Very, very serious report on the front page of today's Wall Street Journal. And officers of the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had worked with Hamas, it says, since August to devise the air, land, and sea incursions, the most significant breach of Israel's borders since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, according to those sources. Do you think Israel will attack Iran's nuclear sites?
If there are any attacks by Israel against Iran, they will be extremely targeted. I think that's the operative word that you use there. And we've seen that before, right? It's been happening for many years. I don't know how much we've heard about it. It hasn't been broadcast so widely, but for those of us who are following this, we know that there have been targeted attacks on weapons depots in Syria, for example, and on nuclear sites in Iran. But again, extremely targeted, not hitting any civilian sites. And of course, I want to mention something that has been a silver lining in all of this is watching the people of Iran and the people of Israel unite and give each other support. The Israeli people gave tremendous support to the Iranians during this last year after the Mahsa Amini protest, as you said, the 22-year-old girl who was killed in Iran because of her hijab, and the protests that followed on the streets of Iran because of it. We saw tremendous support in Israel and the people of Israel. And now we're seeing tremendous support on the streets of Iran for the people of Israel and the massacre that they experienced. They're coming to understand that they share the same enemy, the Iran regime, which is funding terrorism, whether it's inside Iran or abroad in Israel, exporting terrorism and using the money that belongs to the Iranian people, that belongs to humanitarian causes, and using it to launch these terror attacks.
Certainly, that is a silver lining. We see the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin and the Israeli flag draped in the Israeli flag. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower, big pro-Israeli show there, as well as in Beverly Hills right now. There's a pro-Israel rally happening right here closer to home. And Dr. Julian Gold, MD, the mayor of Beverly Hills, was among the first to issue a statement expressing outrage about what happened and calling on our administration to support Israel immediately. And And let me ask you this, Lisa. You were honored very significantly by the Simon Wiesenthal Center recently, the Simon Wiesenthal Medal of Valor you received for defending human rights, for your work in highlighting what's happening in Iran, especially the courageous protests by Iranian women. So we get the chance to publicly congratulate you on that. And what is happening in Iran at the moment, and especially as it relates to those demonstrations following the death of the 22-year-old who was killed by the police there?
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, the people of Iran, they still have the momentum of revolution. They still are chanting for regime change. But of course, they are waiting for global support on the level of the EU and the United States giving them that support. They know that it all starts at the White House. And unless we get somebody in the White House who supports their cause and doesn't want to give billions of dollars and normalize relations with Iran's regime, but rather would support the people who want to get rid of their regime. Once we see something along those lines, I think the people of Iran will be in better shape to get rid of their government. But the people's movement, the grassroots movement, is still very, very strong. We're seeing a very strong will, a strong spirit among Iranian people. And I hope for better days across the Middle East and across the world, where the people who are truly fighting to be free and to live in peace get to that wish.
Lisa DAFTARI, thank you very much for taking the call this evening. We look forward to staying in close contact with you as all of this unfolds. Lisa DAFTARI, Editor-in-Chief of the Foreign Desk, recipient of the Simon Wiesenthal Medal of Valor. And also, you can follow her on X, formerly known as Twitter, Lisa DAFTARI. Thank you very much for joining us live here this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Frank.
Thank you very, very much. And friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process. The team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark's number in your phone under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC, assessing the economic impact of the war in Israel following the shock attack by Hamas over the weekend. Oil prices did jump on concerns that the situation in Israel and Gaza could disrupt output from the Middle East, which accounts for about a third of the global supply of oil. We did see the price of oil spike today, up more than $3, up $3.59 at 86 and change. This after a big drop last week. And we saw Brent crude in London, the international benchmark, approach $90 again, up $3.57 at the close today to $88.15 a barrel. Watching all of this closely is oil industry analyst John KILDUFF at Again Capital, CNBC contributor and longtime contributor here on this program. John, thank you very much for taking the call here on this latest crisis now. Give us your reaction to what's happened and the impact we're seeing here in the energy markets.
Well, yes, Frank, and good to be on with you despite the circumstances. And look, this is a horrific, tragic event. Unfortunately, for those of us who follow the Middle East closely over the years, like I have, it's not nothing new. This certainly took it to a whole new level, though, as was stated by Israeli Defense Forces and Prime Minister Netanyahu. So the question for the oil market, and I will tell you, as we sit here right now, is the fallout from all this as the things get straightened out by Israel. Oil shouldn't be a problem. We've talked about how the Saudi Arabian government has, leaned into the market hard by constraining supply dramatically. They have a productive capacity of over 12 million barrels a day. They're currently only producing about 9. So there's a significant extra supply cushion that could easily be ramped up, assuming the Saudis would want to come to the rescue of the market if there is any kind of material supply disruption event here, involving particularly Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. The big question here, Frank, for the oil market and really, I guess, for everyone is, where does this go from here? What kind of escalation are we going to see? already hearing about troop massing, Hezbollah massing on the Lebanon border to the north, and Israeli troops moving that way. You have to believe that if the Wall Street Journal reporting is true, that Iran's fingerprints are all over this and are behind it, that Iranian assets, either on sea, in Syria, or even in country, as your previous amazing guest just stated, will be targeted. And that's what the oil market will be waiting for, because, obviously, the Iranians then will have to respond, and then this thing starts to really escalate. And the pieces are in place here for this, obviously, to escalate with the, U.S. troops and naval forces moving into the region, and just, what we're staring down here. Again, though, supplies are relatively tight around the world in terms of crude oil because of what the Saudis have been doing. But the problem the Saudis have and the rest of the world has is the United States, given our dominant energy position here. We're producing, I just told you, Saudis at 9 million. We're pushing on 13 million. And we're exporting around 5 million, when back in the day we would be importing 7 to 10 million barrels a day. So it's quite a turnaround since, say, 1973, and when we last went through a horrific state of affairs in that part of the world. So, we're holding our breath here in the oil market. The oil market didn't react all that violently, and certainly is keeping things in perspective, which is what I'm trying to do.
All this happened on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. You probably know the history better than I do, but then we have the Arab oil embargo and all that. Might there be some fallout along those lines this time around?
Potentially, Frank. It's an unfortunate timing. I mean, it's just a horrific thing altogether. But there had been some rapprochement with Iran. The Iranian oil production was on the rise. Exports were on the rise. And, of course, the Saudis were close to closing a deal with Israel that had been started under the Trump administration to normalize relations with Israel. Well, they've broken that off, because the Saudis have, with Israel. They're all forced – everybody's sort of forced into their corners in that part of the world, if you will. So there is a real potential, obviously, if the Israelis were to respond in such a way that the Arab community can only view it as offensive to them and their sensibilities, despite what the horrific nature of what went on over the weekend here, then yes, I mean, you could see a coordinated response here from the Arab countries. That's something that, we're going to be on guard for here in the oil market. And, it becomes sort of a tabletop exercise in terms of, what would happen next? What would the United States have to do? Would we have to preclude our own crude oil exports and fuel exports to sort of prop up our own supplies here, which would sort of leave the rest of the world in the lurch? But again, a lot of levers, Frank. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but obviously China's a big factor. They are certainly going to be warning Iran and the other oil producers who, supply them, and they are the biggest customer out there, to not mess around with the oil supply lines. So again, from my little corner of the world, these are the things that we'll be watching. But again, will the Saudis have to step up and support their Arab brothers here? Potentially, and that's what we're all holding our breath on here and trying to deign.
Nothing but a very serious situation, no matter how you look at it. And if Iran is attacked by Israel, then all bets are off at that point, where the price of oil and everything else would go at that point.
For sure, Frank. And again, also too, even if Iranian naval assets or Iranian merchant marine or crude tankers or fuel tankers get attacked by Israel, everything's going to be fair game for sure here, rightfully so. Yep. So yes, that's what we're waiting for. What's the escalation? How high is it going to go? For now, again, like I said, the stock market bounced off its lows here today. Everyone in the markets are trying to sort of take a wait and see approach and see where this actually goes. But that's going to be it. I mean, what Israel does to Iran is the make or break here for the scenarios.
John, thank you very much. We'll keep an open line to you as we follow these epic developments here at this point. John KILDUFF, oil industry analyst at Again Capital, CNBC contributor and longtime contributor right here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. I'll be back again tomorrow evening in the 5 o'clock hour. Say two now for Royal Oaks and the 790 KBC News Blitz. Here on 790 KBC.
Susie Schuster and Amy Trask present offbeat conversations and expert sports commentary as they ask, what the football?
When my family found out how long it took me to figure out why Charles Woodson named his wine Intercept, they said, there's a reason that you had trouble in school.
You know, not everyone knows. You know, when they think of a bottle of Intercept, they don't know that I play football.
Well, what I've learned is a smooth defensive back can make smooth wine.
That's what it's all about.
What the Football with Susie Schuster and Amy Trask. The podcast is available Tuesdays, wherever you listen.